Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I first must declare my interest as a consultant paediatrician who has looked after children with gender dysphoria in the past and is likely to do so in the future. And we must remember that there are vulnerable children that we are talking about today. Madam Deputy Speaker, the first and most obvious question is why? Why has this government chosen to fund experiments with puberty blockers on physically healthy children? Despite saying he was comfortable with this trial in a briefing to MPs, the Secretary of State told the media on Friday and Select Committee this morning that he is in fact uncomfortable with it. Why is it even being considered before the data linkage study is complete? 9,000 children went through the Tavistock. Many of them came out regretting being encouraged to irreversibly damage their bodies. We should look carefully at those outcomes before we make the same mistakes. What steps is he taking to secure the data from the Tavistock and have it analysed? What steps is he taking to hold to account those obstructing access to data linkage information? And what assessment has he made of the motivations of those obstructing that data when this is a study to safeguard children? And what of the trial itself? 226 children will go through this trial. Is that a limit or a target? These children will be randomised to getting puberty blockers now or in a year's time. All will be analysed at 2 years. They will still be children. They may only be 11 years old. How can these results demonstrate a meaningful outcome? The control group isn't properly randomised but chosen from the Horizon Intensive Trial Group. Is the Secretary of State concerned that this will introduce bias? The criteria of getting puberty blockers under this trial requires just one parent to consent and for the clinician to think it will benefit the child. But on what basis will the clinician decide? The CAS review said the vast majority of children with gender dysphoria will recover, with only a few persisting with trans identities into adulthood. It is not possible to predict which those children will be. So does he accept that the vast majority of children in this, his Streeting trial, will be given drugs, will be physically healthy children whose distress would get better without any puberty blockers, and that therefore the vast majority of the children in this trial are being unnecessarily experimented on with risky medications under his leadership?
The Shadow Minister asks why, to which there is a simple answer. Why is because it was recommended by Dr. Cass in the Cass review, which was commissioned by my predecessor, Sir Sajid Javid. I think that was the right thing to do, and it's why when my predecessor brought forward the Cass review, I supported it in opposition and certainly didn't try and play politics with an extremely vulnerable group of children and young people. In terms of why, I'll tell her why, because under the previous government, those puberty-suppressing hormones were prescribed without proper oversight, supervision or safety, and we didn't hear a peep for years about that fact until Dr. Cass, commissioned by Sir Sajid Javid, who deserves enormous credit for it, did the study that was published, widely supported, with this recommendation. And they may have changed their tune in opposition, but I do remember what the Conservatives said in government when they published the Cass review and supported its recommendations. And I think that is a real shame. She accuses me of inconsistency, so let me be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker. Am I comfortable that this clinical trial has undergone the proper process and ethical approval to ensure the highest standards and supervision? Yes, I'm comfortable about that. Am I uncomfortable about puberty-suppressing hormones for this group of young people, for this particular conditions? Yes, I am, because of risks. It is why I was also uncomfortable when I put in place upheld the temporary ban by my predecessor, but then put in place a permanent ban. The reason I was uncomfortable with that too is because I had to look children and young people in the eye and their parents, who told me in no uncertain terms that that decision was harmful to them, as have many other clinicians who've opposed that decision. And the reason why, whatever my discomfort in this extremely sensitive area, I have made this decision is because I am following clinical advice. And because as Health Secretary, it is my responsibility to follow expert advice. And had the Tavistock Clinic faced such challenge and scrutiny a decade ago, we wouldn't be in this mess. The Conservatives were right to commission the Cass review. They were right to accept its recommendations. I accept there is now a difference on this particular recommendation. I would urge members not to walk away from the cross-party consensus we built behind that approach, to build on the work that Dr. Cass has done. As for the important questions she raises, there will be 2 groups within the trial, as well as a further control group of children and young people with gender incongruence who do not receive puberty-suppressing hormones. At least 226 participants are required in order to detect a statistically significant difference between the 2 treatment groups. However, this is not a target, and no young person will find themselves on this trial because there is a drive to make sure there is a certain number of young people participating. In order to participate in this trial, it has to have the most robust clinical oversight from clinicians within the service, as well as national oversight and the consent of parents. And it is only where it is deemed that young people would benefit that they will be on this programme. She asked about the data linkage study. That's important. The data linkage study will be undertaken. When the data linkage study is completed, it will not provide us with the same evidence as this clinical trial. That's why Dr. Cass made a distinction between this trial and the data linkage study. She asks about the motivations of those who withheld data. That is an extremely important question. I think it is utterly appalling that anyone in a position of responsibility in the NHS withheld data on a very vulnerable group of children and young people. I also accept that while there were many people in the Tavistock Clinic involved in these services, the fact that Dr. Cass found such a lack of rigour, such a lack of standards, such a lack of proper oversight is disgraceful. And it is the clinicians who are well-meaning and ideologically driven that have given me most cause for concern in this whole debacle and have done more harm to children and young people and the trans community than most other people who've taken part in this debate and discussion. Finally, I do appreciate the work that Dr. Cass has done. I'm glad that she is in the other place, bringing welcome scrutiny. Were she not supportive of this approach, I may think again. She's given her recommendation, she's given her support. I'm following clinical advice. It is not comfortable, but I do believe it is the right thing to do on balance.